So really, we wanted to sort of set the context and frame the day. We're going to talk about really three different pieces of what we feel like we're bringing to this room today. And the first one really is around the movement, how these folks in this room are leading a movement for boys and men of color. We're going to also talk about this meeting, how we've structured the conversation and the days to come here. And we're also going to talk about this moment and how we maximize this current moment in the boys and men of color space.
Great, and so again, I'm Marcus Littles, and it's really important for us to set the context for these next couple of days around that the movement that this work is in this room, and not in an arrogant way in terms of like where our invitation list was perfect, as much as that when we talk about the work, when we think about the work, we as the work's profile it continues to rise. It's really important for us to frame that like we designed this next couple of days with the understanding that that many of the leaders in this country, many of the actors in this country who are invested in the life outcomes of boys and men of color as part of a broader equity and justice agenda, that's who we sought to have in this room. And some are from the space of scholarship, some are from the space of policymakers, some are funders, some are activists, organizers, institution builders, but from all the different spaces and places that each of you occupy, that we feel like the work is in this room. And so we're starting from the place of movement because we feel like the movement is here. So as we think about the movement and we think about this room, that in this room have been the principles of why we've had so many school discipline victories in this country. In this room are the reason why the public discourse around race, equity, boys and men of color in this country, it is a product of the work that has been happening by people in this room that you all have led. And some of you have been leading it without even knowing it. It's just what you're doing every day. It's just what your work is every day. And so it's our role here is to be a catalyst, not an opponent of the broader movements that we're a part of. That this work around boys and men of color should be a catalyst to our racial justice work. It should be a catalyst to our work around LGBTQ rights. It should be a catalyst to our work around new citizens, returning citizens. And so folk frame it as this concept of intersectionality, which I'm not always sort of cool with because I'm not great with big words, and so I don't understand what that means sometimes. and so it really is like sort of what's the verb, and the verb is that the work around boys and men of color should be a catalyst to the broader and other specific outcomes, violence against women, reducing the wage gap for women of color. Like all of that work is not just connected, because I feel like connected is not a strong enough word, that it is a catalyst. And so we designed the space, and this room and this movement is about a space that is catalytic. And so we are lifting up imperatives for our work. We don't have to spend a whole bunch of time naming imposters. What is the work we're trying to do? Not what's the frame in terms of how we figure out who's really doing the work or not. Imposters reveal themselves. And so if we focus on the imperative, we don't have to worry about the imposters. And so I think we're going to push folk throughout the space not to tell us what they are against, but what is it that we are building in our communities to improve the life outcomes of boys and men of color.
And so And so in building in this space, because we believe in that vision, we've really engaged a broad set of folks with us to help plan this sort of space. And so the first set of folks that we've really engaged is our co-conveners. You got a chance to hear from Cedric from Mitchell Kapor Center for Social Impact yesterday. These are some of our other co-conveners. I'm not going to take the time to read them all, but if you're a co-convener, if you're someone who's co-invested in this space with us, we'd love it if you could just stand right now in the room. If you work for one of these institutions that is co-convened with us, we'd love for you to stand. Thank you. Thank you, Decker. I appreciate you participating. So the co-conveners in the room have really been integral to us. And Decker's a great example of someone who has not only been someone who supported this space, co-invested in this space, but it's really been a co-thinker with us around how to design this space. We also have an actual advisory committee that informed us as well. If you're on the advisory committee for this gathering, we'd love for you to stand now at this time. Thank you. So our advisory committee members have been integral in terms of helping us think through who to invite, who to make sure is in the room, who to have participate in sessions. They designed sessions with us, and they've also helped us think about this overall theme. And lastly, we just wanted to quickly thank the last set of folks that have really helped us co-think around this space, and that's our staff. So our team here at Frontline Solutions, as well as folks at PolicyLink, if you're part of those teams, if you could stand up, we'd love to acknowledge you as well. So we really have benefited from a broad set of folks to inform this practice. And we come to some conclusions collectively as a group around what we believe leadership is about. This ultimately is a gathering that's about leaders. But different than other gatherings across the country, this one reflects our vision of leadership. And our vision of leadership has been influenced by adaptive leadership. It's been influenced, we feel like there's some good things to pull from in the current buzz around collective impact. But our vision of leadership has been equally influenced by the things that we've seen with our own eyes, the things that we touch with our own hands, the work that we've seen happen in our communities, the history that we've lived through the eyes of our elders, that we've heard from. When Hollis Watkins says that the civil rights movement didn't happen with the March on Washington, it happened when we were banging door to door in small towns in Mississippi and Alabama, and lucky if we got 10 people to show up in a church for a meeting. Tim Tyson says history doesn't begin when the New York Times shows up. And so what we know is that movements don't happen on stage or on a live stream. Movements happen in places. They happen with groups of folks that come together around a purpose. And so our gathering is built around that principle. And so we're going to ask you to do several things while you're here. One is we're going to provide some resources and opportunities to hopefully help you grow as a leader, to help you grow the work that you're doing. We're going to expose you to what we feel like are some of the promising and best practices. We're going to have exhibits out in the hallway for you to see organizations that are doing incredible work. We've mapped out models of how we feel like that work is happening and work with those organizations to really articulate their story so that we can understand what's happening in this work. But we're also going to ask you to engage collectively. We're going to also ask you to do the tough work of coming together to have a conversation with your peers, with your colleagues, and move forward a collective agenda. On Wednesday, we're going to get an opportunity for folks to come together with their delegations, and we've assigned everyone to a delegation to have a conversation around how to move this work forward. And we know some of those groups are already doing this work together. Some of these groups are already in partnership and having deep and meaningful impact in places like Oakland and Detroit. But we also know that some of you all, this will be some of your first time having that conversation. But we're going to encourage all of you, and actually we're going to demand that all of you all participate in that space with us, that you think with us collectively about how this work happens. Because ultimately, this work going forward is not about Micah or about Marcus or about any of the individual leaders in this room. It's about us coming together to move this work forward. And so we are committed to building an infrastructure and a network of support that's going to give us the ability to move forward in this work.
So there's a frame for this movement that we talked about, and then we tried to talk about how the meeting is informed by the movement, but it all should be informed by a really clear grasp of what this moment is. What this moment is in this country. I think that as we think about the boys and men of color work. I'm struck by two things, and they can be opposites. They can be sort of on polar, polar realities. But I think both are realities that we need to grapple with and acknowledge and learn to balance. One reality is that this work around boys and men of color, as a catalyst to other movements and a movement in and of itself that is synergistic, is an under-interrogated space. We have not interrogated it enough. There's great reasons for that, but there are fair and just critiques around gender equity in the context of this work, and how much of this work is around improving the life outcomes of boys and men of color, but in a way that does not promote misogyny. that we are building allies so that when we talk about boys and men of color, it's multiple masculinities and not a narrow frame that we're trying to fit young people into. And so it's under-interrogated, and I think that it has to be okay for us to believe in the life outcomes of boys and men of color and to acknowledge that it's under-interrogated. But the other polar reality is that this moment is transformative. We are in a moment to where that even though there's a lot of opposition, that this work around boys and men of color has created a space where we are talking about race in this country. We are talking about identity, that the public discourse was not an invitation, hey, let's talk about race. The public discourse has been a door that people in this room have kicked open, right? And so oftentimes when we think about, and from our space, like where all of you occupy and where you fit within work around boys and men of color, sometimes we are cheerleaders who get mad about critiques. And sometimes we're, so focused on our critique that we don't acknowledge the transformative moment of right now. And so we are pushing everyone, and so that's myself, but that's people in this room, right? Like that sometimes that we get annoyed when someone says, well, what about sort of women? What about this population? What about this population? And that should not feel like an attack. That should be an understanding of the reality. Well, we got to figure that out because we've not interrogated this enough. That oftentimes people say that, your greatest critic should be your greatest servant, and your greatest servant should be your greatest critic. And that has to be okay to be both. So part of this moment is how well do we operate in both of those polar realities, as opposed to trying to take a side between those two polar realities. The other characteristic of this moment right now is that we should really, people talked about it yesterday, be building on what exists. And what exists, that there are models that many of you are leading and have learned from. And how do we learn from history? How do we learn from other movements? How do we learn from the strong work of Focus as a Room? How do we, when we think about and when we hear from, whether it is a scholar or a funder or someone who's a social entrepreneur, when someone says scale, how is that not insulting to the person on the ground who's doing this work every day? Right, because it's not about scale in terms of just a structure. It's about scale in terms of how do we impact droves. And so we really do need to balance an inquiry with building on what works and what we know that exists. And then I think really Darnell Moore and others and Father G and others talked about it yesterday. How do we hold ourselves to as high a standard as we do our critique of our opposition? Because at the end of the day, part of why we brought together leaders is not just to affirm your leadership, but to push us to do better. And that to push one another to be better, to be strong. And so, I don't have much appetite for when you engage with someone personally or institutionally and because I'm not a funder, so I can't do anything for you, right? And so it's slightly annoying sometimes when everyone's talking points is about what they do well. And it's not always with an analysis around where my gaps are and what I need. And so, if you get my attention and to get sort of interpersonally or professionally, have an analysis of what you need and how you can get better. Because our collective analysis of how we can get better is how we're going to move, not how well we get to market what we think we do well now. And so this moment is one in which I feel like we have to be hard on ourselves, because if we're not, that there's the cost is the continued lives of young men in this community, the lives of young women, broken families, and broken communities that I feel like that we're trying to be a part of empowering. And so we're excited about this meeting. We're excited about the movement, but we are excited about the realities, but also the complexities of this moment.
So one of the things that we're going to do throughout the course of our time together is get to hear from a diverse set of folks. There is a new wave of leaders that are stepping up to do this work across the country. We wanted you to hear from as many of those folks as possible throughout the course of the day. And so, in the past, you probably heard more than you wanted to from me and Marcus. You'll be hearing less from us over the course of the next couple of days, and we'll be hearing from other leaders across the country that are doing this incredible work. And so it's my privilege now to bring to the stage Jordan Theory, who is part of our team here at Frontline Solutions. He's based in Los Angeles, California. He's the project manager for the Executives Alliance for Opportunities for Boys and Men of Color. He also serves as project director for the work that we are doing with under construction. So many of you all have seen the exhibits out in the foyer. Folks that were with us last year got a chance to see some of the videos of organizations across the country. And so Jordan's going to give us some context for that work and how we can share a moment in looking at some of those organizations that are doing this incredible work. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Micah. Good morning, everyone. So I have a pleasure today of sharing with you two short documentaries of our under construction project. And Under Construction is a multimedia series that we are utilizing video, photography, written word, and graphic design to provide a snapshot of the work that you all are doing, the blood and the sweat and the love that goes into this work that we put under the banner Boys and Men of Color work. And our goal for this was to really provide a snapshot not only to the general public of what this work entails and what it looks like and how in all the different forms it exists, but also for us to create a community of practice and to be able to provide some learning moments for the work happening across the country in this field and to lift up promising models and best practices. So today, this morning, we're going to watch the first one where we're profiling the Clayton County system of care. And we will have a chance to talk with the administrator of the program after the film, but we'll get into it right now. It's about 6 minutes long, and we'll talk about it a little bit after. So we can go ahead and start the clip.
I've been in this county since 1973. It's gone through a lot of changes, and the dramatic changes began after the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. We began to see a shift in demographics, and this county was primarily a county of white folks, and it was after the Olympics that we began to see a tremendous influx of people of color.
The kids that we service here in our neighborhoods, a lot of them, their socioeconomic status, I would say, is below or right at poverty level.
There's repeated family patterns of dysfunction that have infiltrated almost all areas of their life, whether it be poor social skills or school performance.
We have a problem in this country in which we are not really thinking the right way about how we address crime.
We are targeted just because of our skin color, so that's already one strike against us. And then the fact that we're males, that's already two strikes. So the fact that you're coming out here as a young black man, you're trying to make something happen, do better for your life, do better for your family, those around you, it's a little difficult.
The inspiration for the Second Chance Court program was a gentleman named Oscar. So he was arrested. When I saw Oscar brought in those handcuffs and heard him speak, and the fact that this was a young man who had no prior history, how smart and intelligent, how articulate he was, I was looking at somebody who could be a great person, who could do something great in his future. And you know what? I also knew that if I sent him to prison, I'd knock him off that road to success. I'd knock him off.
Clayton County community institutions realized there were too many students like Oscar falling out of school and heading into the criminal justice system. In order to address this problem at its root, they formed a multi-stakeholder partnership between the juvenile court, the school district, and local organizations like Tips for Teens, the Center for Adolescent Male Development and their Young CEO Institute, and Grace Harbor Health Clinic that aims to provide comprehensive services that will help young males achieve in the classroom, develop career goals, and make healthy decisions. This expansive new model is what they call the system of care.
The mission of the system of care and the core message that they aim to seek to deliver is in school, out of court, and onto a positive and healthy future.
We needed to take the best of all that we were doing and put it under one umbrella organization, and with a backbone agency driving the purpose. We had programs that were delinquency focused for kids that were already in the system. We had programs that were intervention focused for schools, and we are adding another piece for kids with dependency issues of deprivation and of truancy.
2 years ago, I was always talking. I just didn't pay attention enough to where I could do the work on my own. I have improved more. I've been paying more attention to my teachers, doing more work, and focusing more on learning than talking to other people.
A program like this is especially needed for a child who's being raised by a grandmother and his parents are not in the picture because they need the guidance that sometimes grandmothers can't provide. I truly would not be able to give him the knowledge and the information that Tips for Teens gives him.
Each one of these young men that comes into our doors is already brilliant in and of themselves. Our task is to pull it out. So it's a strength-based approach.
In 6th grade, I think I got in trouble a bit 20 times maybe. 7th grade, about 10, and then this current grade, 8th grade, I've been in trouble twice, I think. So I think that's really helping me do the right thing and succeed in life. Participating in the Young CEO for me is like having my father here with me. It's like it fills in that hole in my heart that kind of replaces him, puts him in that place.
The system of care is not only a system of providing providers from all different vantage points depending upon the needs of the child, but it's also broadening the age group and going as young as possible so that we can look at prevention instead of detention.
Tips for Teens makes me a better leader for my brother because whatever I do, he most likely does, and he copies it, and he does it over and over again. So if I do good in Tips for Teens and be more respectful to people and do the right things, he will most likely do it.
And it helps us look back on our past and better ourselves from the make some mistakes we have made.
I see success in my future. I feel like I could tell my children when I grow up, I made it.
Thank you. Are the lights gonna come? All right, I don't know. Thank you. So I have a pleasure. We have Cheryl Teskey here from the Clayton County System of Care, and I want to make sure if we sit down, people can still see us because I know the lighting situation is cool. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let me get my questions here. This video is one of 12 that we are producing throughout the year, and it was just released today on BMAfunders.org. If you go to bmafunders.org and click on Under Construction, you can see the full profile with the logic model, the photo exhibit, and the video and the written article. And it's really a powerful piece. And you also have the pleasure of seeing it in the hallways with a few of the other profiles here at the hotel. But I wanted to, Cheryl, thank you for coming and for joining us. I wanted to ask just a couple of questions, and one of those was, this is a collective impact model. that you guys are implementing there in Clayton County. Can you talk about one of the challenges that you guys have overcome or are still trying to overcome in creating the synergy between all the different players in the system of care?
Yes, moving toward collective impact means that instead of addressing the needs of male youth of color being just more work added to your plate, it needs to become the work. Serving our youth with a common youth agenda is the work, and it needs to become the culture. It needs to be what we do. And one of the challenges around that is when you bring all of the leaders together, they must participate and own that work. And to do that, you have to realize that it's going to be forever fluid. You can't make it about funding streams. You can't make it about success. You have to make it about what works as a group, as a collective for our youth. And that's been a huge challenge.
Thank you. And this model that you guys are implementing there has gotten some traction across the state. Is that right? And what does it look like for incorporating these same practices in the other counties across Georgia?
One of the big successes that will be starting soon is that Governor Deal has embraced the idea of Annie E. Casey's Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, and they have a help desk online. You can go and check out what that is about. And he has embraced the idea of supporting this work for Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative statewide, which is something we did in early 2000 and were not successful at doing because we took it statewide before it was ready to go statewide. But now it's time.
All right, great, thank you. Well, we are short on time, so that will be all. But Cheryl, you'll be around for the remainder of the conference and available to answer any questions. And I'm also around if anyone has any questions around the under construction project. And so thank you all. Is Marcus, are you coming up?
Good morning, because it's a bigger group than it was before. Good morning. Mr. Gomez, Juan Gomez, if you could come up, we're gonna hang out. So we're really excited about the session this morning. Juan Gomez, who I'm bringing up, is a good colleague and good friend, and he really has been one of the thought leaders behind this this gathering. He's on the advisory committee, and so there's a little game I'd like to play while Juan speaks. And so, I'd love everybody to try to, count how many times he says revolution, because that's his word. Juan Gomez.
Thanks, Marcus. Well, good morning, buenos dias, everybody. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank all our ancestors in each of the four directions, and bring that spirit today, this morning, and for the rest of this conference. I always think about that because whether our people came here willingly or forcefully or just lived here, we've always done the best we can to come in a good way and present ourselves before other people. And today when Marcus asked me, a few weeks ago for me to frame this, I said, well, do you really want me to go up there, I may get in trouble. And he just laughed. And when we're thinking about building a movement and we talk about equity and diversity, and that's good, but we need to move forward with excellence and truth. And that in these spaces, as much as we want to talk about the vertical game, that we really got to talk about, the horizontal game amongst each other and that conversation about race beyond white people, amongst ourselves, because a lot of times we don't take the time to talk about that because it puts us in really dark spaces. It brings up a lot of stuff, but we need to talk about that. And if we can work through that, we can work through anything. We all know that a lot of this work is not necessarily about the people at the top, it's amongst each other and how we kind of work around each other and with each other. We're going to have a crew of young people. I'm pretty excited. This is an intergenerational opportunity. And these are millennials. They think different. They organize and they mobilize totally different than us. And they're decolonizing structures around masculinity and immigration. You know, in the 60s, Martin Luther King talked about, I have a dream. Well, about 50, 60 years later, you have a whole crew of dreamers, and they're believing. And they armed themselves with solidarity and butterflies, and they're tearing this thing up. They're not waiting. You know, we talk about the next generation civil rights. Well, this is the now generation, and they're making it happen. You know, you have young people as game changers, you know, and they're not necessarily focused on color, but a consciousness around excellence, and that we have to demand excellence. You know, we spent some time up at the White House talking to the folks from My Brother's Keeper, and they're saying, this is just going to be a report, and it's just a start. But we need the foundations to push on us. We're like, damn, we're going to wait on the foundations. So it's really up to us in this room. When Marcus talks about we got to push ourselves, then we got to remember that we were here in the Long March, that if you're a funder, an organizer, or whatnot, especially if you're a funder, you're still an activist wherever you're at. You always remember that's your role. You know, these young people, they deserve that. You know, and I know they're always focusing on this policy and this game like that, but that if we invest in on the ground right now, we make things happen. How many times have we passed initiatives and all these quality, you know, things, but it still gets stuck at the county level, but it's been our young people and elders in those communities have pushed for these meaningful gains in the community. So we just think a little bit about that, you know, and the concept of building a movement. I always like to talk about the movement because a lot, and running around and talking to different executive directors and saying what happened to a lot of them is that they got stuck in services and programs, chasing the money. You know, they found themselves pushed out of the movement, and now they're awakening themselves with this moment in time that we have. People are believing once again, and they're not stopping. So without further ado, I just want to, you know, introduce my colleague, Tremaine Lee, a national reporter from MSNBC. You know, please come up.
Good morning. I spend a lot of my time reporting on issues that directly impact young people and our most vulnerable people in our communities across the country. And I'm often asked whether or not there's a sense of apathy or whether this younger generation is galvanizing around these issues and fighting on their own behalf. And we've seen it after Trayvon Martin, after Jordan Davis, Oscar Grant before them, but in so many other ways. In Philadelphia, when they're closing schools, students are out there fighting in their communities. In Chicago, the same thing. And the strength of any movement for positive social change comes when those who are most impacted have the agency to speak for themselves. So often, adults or elders speak at young people and not with them. Today, we're going to change that. I'd like to introduce a very diverse collective of young and dynamic young people, young leaders from across the country. Please welcome Elizabeth. Clarence, Mariama. All right, settle down, folks, settle down. It's just the beginning. Jhovani and Taiyana. Each of these wonderful, amazing, dynamic young people was asked to write a letter about their experience in their community, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what motivates them to make change. So let's take a listen.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin my letter today, I would like to pay tribute to two phenomenal women that we lost this past year, Dr. Maya Angelou and activist Yuri Kochiyama. So if we can bow our heads for a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. Dear changemakers, I stand before you today as the daughter of genocide survivors, a Cambodian American woman that is leading a movement where many of our boys and men are still banging on the streets, behind bars, or forced on a plane to be sent to a motherland that did not nurture their growth. My parents arrived to the US in 1981, just 2 years prior experiencing unimaginable war atrocities. My elders were expected to rebuild their lives while acculturating to a new country. I was born 4 years later in 1985. It was here in the streets of California that the values and principles of street life formed the identity of my generation. I identify as second generation. Many of my older siblings and cousins are generation 1.5, and they survived the hood by forming their own gangs to defend themselves against pre-existing ones. As a young girl, I grew up being told to literally walk quietly and was reprimanded for running with the boys. As a daughter of immigrant parents, my childhood came with a different set of gendered hardships within the home. I yearned for my freedom, yet the freedom that my male cousins were afforded in the streets of Oakland provided a harsh and unforgiving lens. I remember always feeling a sense of apprehension when heading to their hood, watching them as they puffed up their small chicken frame chest and threw up their sets to passersby. To an average person, they are gang members, but to me, they are resilient young men doing their best in the environment they were forced to resettle in and with the resources that they were given. Nonetheless, I still feared this gang culture, so my family rarely stayed too long before we headed home. So as years pass, and this cousin was sent to a group home, and that cousin gets locked up in YA, I felt helpless and hopeless as I scrawled my middle school cursive on wide-ruled paper saying, "I miss you. I can't wait for you to come home." I felt sad and angry as I sealed those envelopes and placed them in the mailbox. Little did we know that their survival method would become reasons for them to live in fear of deportation years later. As I continued my education with pangs of guilt and ambivalence about my privilege, in 2011, I reconnected to my cousins, whom I felt so different from, yet shed countless tears for. I was introduced to a fierce woman, Mia Leah Kiernan, the co-founder of One Love Movement, at the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center Leadership and Advocacy Training. It was with One Love that I found my education as a vehicle to give voice to our struggle. As an educated Cambodian woman, I refuse to allow my privilege and gender to draw a line between myself and my cousin, or between dreamers and former offenders. And our goal is to remove these divisive labels of the good immigrants versus the bad immigrants, because it only destroys our collective power that we hold as communities of color facing oppression. The other day, my cousin, who lives in fear every day of being ripped away from his wife and children, looked at me and said, "Liz, this is why I'm so thankful for what you do, because this shit is crazy." So dear friends and colleagues, as we traverse this crazy world together, I hope we do it with a commitment to all of our boys and men of color. I urge you to consider how the school to prison to now deportation pipeline affects our communities and address these shameful policies together moving forward. In solidarity, Elizabeth O. Or is it Clarence?
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Clarence Ford, and I've addressed this letter to my community. I have sinus problems right now. I wasn't always this person that you see speaking before you today. I once was referred to by a judge as a menace to society during my juvenile court hearing. And I was raised by a single black woman, and she raised me and my two younger sisters. And, growing up where I come from, they don't really, education wasn't really emphasized. It was more so sports and things like that. And I thought the only way for me to be successful in this world is by being, a great athlete. But when that didn't work out for me, just like so many other African Americans in my community, I embraced the criminal lifestyle. You know, I started selling drugs to make money, and I started hanging with my negative friends. And, you know, I just wanted to make a name for myself in the neighborhood. And, you know, me and my friends at the time, we were making a lot of enemies. And the more enemies we made, and it went from like fighting to shooting. And that's kind of what led me to start, you know, buying and using guns. And, you know, we just glorified violence. And my first time getting involved with the criminal justice system, I was 16 years old. And at 17, I was expelled from high school and served my first sentence in juvenile hall. But, you know, I hadn't been rehabilitated there, so it wasn't long before I got out when I started doing the same thing. And, you know, unfortunately, I made one of the worst mistakes of my life was, you know, I committed a robbery first degree. And, you know, I was sentenced to 3 years for that and in prison. And, you know, I'm 20 years old going into this atmosphere. And, you know, those were the lowest years of my life. And, you know, I want to kind of paint a picture for you guys here. I mean, can you just you know, imagine being chained and shackled everywhere you had to go. And, you know, just imagine being shipped around the state like a priority mail package and having to spend most of your time confined in a room about the size of the typical bathroom. And, you know, I had to endure this. And all that time, I had to hide who I really was, you know, for the sake of my safety, because inside there, people are just waiting to see your weakness so that they could take advantage of you. So I couldn't really be who I was. And, you know, prison really psychologically affects the way people behave, you know, because I've witnessed so many things, like people fight over such petty things like cookies, honey buns, and things like that. But, you know, after my sentence, I came home not really knowing what my purpose was on this earth. I enrolled into a community college, and not too long after that, I got involved with community organizing around re-entry issues with the organization I used to work for called the Safe Return Project. And, you know, one of the job qualifications for the job was that, you know, you had to have been incarcerated. And I was like, are you serious? Like, you have to be locked up to have this job? But now I understand why that was one of the qualifications. But yeah, I thought it was a joke at first. And as I got involved, I became passionate about helping the community I once helped destroy. And, you know, we organized around issues that were barriers for people coming home from incarceration. And based on our research and our personal experiences and learnings, we found that in the city of Richmond, there was an 80% unemployment rate for those on probation and parole and people who had recently been released from prison within 18 months. And a lot of the survey participants expressed that there were hardly any services or resources that they could take advantage of. And, you know, based on our campaigns, we based our campaigns and research. We based our campaigns on that research. And a couple of our most successful campaigns were things like Ban the Box. But I don't know how many people here are familiar with that, but, you know, on the application where it asks, like, if you're going to go for a job, apply for a job, and it asks you, have you ever been convicted of a felony? That's the question that deters many people from applying for a job and also gets people eliminated from even getting that job. So that was one of the things that we addressed in the city of Richmond, and we got that question removed from the city of Richmond's applications, and we got it extended to the vendors as well. And, you know, that was just so powerful, because that was one of the very things that I dealt with when I came home from incarceration was getting a job, because I felt like, you know, I was being looked at as, you know, a second-class citizen when it came to that question. But we also stopped the proposed jail expansion in Contra Costa County, which I'm very proud of, because for me to be like sitting in jail and then come home to help stop a proposed jail expansion and instead have the funds allocated to services and resources for people coming home was pretty big, and I never thought I'd be doing something like that. So that was pretty big right there. And, you know, I was one of the youngest people involved within those campaigns. And, you know, to have these powerful people who have the ability to make change in communities listen to a young person like myself who was formerly incarcerated was reassuring and motivational to me that I am a leader. And young people are leaders, and our voices and concerns are valid through these processes where decisions are being made. You know, when we were, I'm gonna share like a brief memory. When we were in the basement of the Richmond City Council Hall, there were like all these decision makers sitting around a table. It was a committee of them, and you know, it was community there as well. And you know, I had like probably about 10 ideas. I was just throwing them out there, and to actually see one of my ideas implemented within the budget it was like, wow, they heard me out, little old me. So you know, that was big for me. And you know, not that many people can come home from incarceration and want to change their community. And by young people like myself and others doing that, I believe it's wonderful and influential. And it was in that moment when I realized that I have a voice and it must be heard, and I'm a voice for those who don't have one. And what has been challenging about this work is getting decision makers and other people to take us serious. You know, because people have these preconceived notions and stigmas that our opinions aren't valid because we're young or we're black or we're formerly incarcerated. So, you know, but we stay committed to our mission, and after a while, people started respecting us and our concerns. These same people will come to us and ask us, what do we think about this certain policy or certain legislation? So, you know, one thing that I love doing is I live to change this stigma and this narrative that people have about young black men or those of us who've been incarcerated. And with that, I'll be able to show the world, for those of us that want to change, all we need is the opportunity and the proper necessary resources. Thank you. And one of the things that really inspires me to, you know, keep doing this work is, you know, I used to stress my mom out so much when I was ripping around the streets, and you know, to see her tears go from being caused from pain and hurt to now she's like crying because of joy. It's just so powerful for me. And you know, thank you. And another moment, like when I really was inspired, was when at my previous school, this young guy came up to me because he had been formerly incarcerated as well. He had been in prison, and he saw my article in the newspaper, and he said, "You know what, man? I'm gonna follow in your footsteps, and I'm gonna be at a prestigious university just like you are." But you know, most of all, what's fulfilling to me is when I look in the mirror, and I remember where I was about 3 years ago. It went from the judge reading my sentence in an empty courtroom to the dean of my school reading out my name and the president handing me my degrees in an auditorium full of people chanting my name. Because I worked hard to get to where I'm at today, and you know, as a result, I'll be starting at UC Berkeley this fall. Thank you. And when I'm done, you know, people are going to call me doctor for it. And then I just want to be a person to change the world through policy and legislation. Thank you all, and that's my story.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Okay, just to awaken you guys up, I want you guys to do a chant with me. So when I say people, you say power. Ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. When I say people, you say power. People. People. When I say people, you say power. People. People. When I say people, you say power. People. People. All right, that was better. To my young people, good morning. My name is Mariama Bangura. I am 17 years old, and I'm a refugee from Sierra Leone. I was so embarrassed when I was taken out of school in handcuffs. Even the police officer who arrested me was very angry. I was so sad. I felt like my future was ruined. I thought I would never have a job anymore. I thought my future was messed up. They took my fingerprints, they took my picture, and they checked me, and I got locked up in the cold room for 3 hours till my mom came and picked me up. I was so scared, upset, depressed, and confused. I was so emotional. I felt like running away. Sierra Leone, my country, was at war. The rebels were everywhere, killing innocent people just because they were from a different country. The rebels would walk and around and asking people, including little children, if they wanted a long sleeve or a short sleeve, which means that if they want their hand cut off from the shoulder or from right here, which was pretty sad. I was so scared. I was so sad and scared. I did not know what to do. I thought I was next because I was so confused. Fleeing. My mom took me and my 7 brothers, and we hid from the rebels. The day my family and I found out that we are on the list to come to the United States, we were full of joy and happiness. And we thought that we were from the struggles, and we thought that we would never have pain again. My young people, we thought that we were free. I moved to the U.S. in 2004, and I started school right away. I was bullied because of my accent, my skin color, and how I looked. I am a refugee, and I did not know what was going on. I could not talk to anybody because I felt like nobody understood me. I was so frustrated and stressed. I wanted to kill myself, and I just wanted to disappear because I felt like I hadn't no love. I felt like nobody loved me or cared about me. Despite this, I am a good student, and I always participate in class. When I was in the sophomore, I was stressed because of problems at home and at the bullying. I could not concentrate on my work, so I had to put my head down. The teacher asked me to go up to the board, and I said no because I did not feel right that day. And then he started yelling at me. I got mad, and I told him, please get out my face. But he didn't listen. So out of anger, I said, I'm going to push you, which I thought that was very, rude, but it did not mean to come out of my mouth because I was very upset that day. He called the security guard on me to take me away. I felt so disrespected. I refused to leave because I felt like I did nothing wrong. I did not feel safe in my own classroom. If the teacher would at least talk to me and ask me what was wrong that day or sent me to a counselor, you and I know that things would have been very different. I needed someone to talk to at that moment. I was not expecting to be arrested for something that could have been solved just by talking to me. To my young people, there are so many of us getting arrested every day for something that could have been avoided by simply talking to us. In Chicago public schools, 29 students are arrested every day. Is that right? No, it's not right. We feel like we are in danger. We just need someone to talk to, and that we can concentrate so that we can feel like somebody loves us. All we want is to be safe. When I was running away to save my life that day in Sierra Leone, all I wanted was love. My mom gave me that love, but we are not always so lucky. And when I had my head down that day in class, all I wanted was love. If we get love at home or school, what we want from the street? Nothing, because we have love. My young people, we need to rise up. We are not at war. We need to come together and unite as one and be strong. Right now, we are the target. But my young people, we are the solution. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning, my fellow chain seekers. How are we doing this morning? My name is Jhovani Becerra, and 2 days ago, I traveled for the first time in 12 years to share my experience as an undocumented student in the United States. I can assure you that the last time I traveled, it was not a nice, air-conditioned, comfortable airplane ride. It was when I came to Denver from Mexico at the age of 5. That was when my mother made the long contemplated decision to pursue a better life for me across the border. The trip took 3 rough, boiling days in a bus, car, and then walking. It's an unimaginable experience that I would never want my children to go through. Once established, I noticed differences between me and the classmates, how cops and soldiers were figures they looked up to, but I was actually afraid of them. On behalf of the 11 undocumented people in the United States, I can admit that most of us learned to keep our frowned upon status incognito. When I was in 5th grade, something happened to me that really brought me down. I was talking to the other students about college, and they said that you couldn't go to college if you're not a legal resident. That's when I realized that I couldn't go to college, that I couldn't travel, that at any time our family could be ripped apart. At that moment, I felt hopeless because I wouldn't have a future of my desires. I could see how my life was structured to continue this cycle of ending up in hard labor like most of our parents. As an outcast from my peers at school, I adapted. I put on a mask and pretended to be like them. I pretended to be legal. Every time the word illegal, immigrant, or alien came up, I wore my mask. It was not until high school that I realized that there are a colossal number of students in my community and all around the United States who face the same hardships that I face. We are deprived of our basic human rights and our faith. Not too long ago, my friend's dad got deported. He spent Father's Day fatherless. Today, thanks to deferred action, DACA, which prevents my deportation, and Padres and Jovenes Unidos, I was capable of traveling here, as well as to have the courage to permanently take off a mask and confidently advocate for others in my community. In Colorado, we have been fighting for the DREAM Act, and when that stalled, we went ahead and won the campaign for in-state tuition for undocumented students. We still have a long way to go for immigrant students' rights. Padres and Jovenes Unidos doesn't just advocate for undocumented students. We fight for the equality and justice of all students. Between 2006 and 2008, we rewrote the entire Denver Public Schools school discipline policy, passed a statewide school discipline law, and between 2011 and 2013, Padres won an intergovernmental agreement, an MOU, between the school district and Denver Police Department to restrict the police role in discipline. If it weren't for organizations like Padres and Jovenes Unidos, many of Colorado students would be in school to jail track, pushed out of school and toward a jail cell. Instead, we are reforming the system so that students are provided with restorative justice that actually teaches students how to resolve conflicts and resolve harms. When I received DACA 2 years ago, I knew that I could start traveling, but I never thought I would because of the rest of my family can't, and I wouldn't want to travel alone without them. But this is different. I wanted to come here to take a step toward reaching my ideal goal, to build a society where no student should ever have to put on a mask because of the injustice and where everyone would have equal opportunities. I traveled here to encourage the continuance of this community of change seekers and equality pursuers. Let us never halt in our progress to ensure that every student's right to a just, high-quality education. Thank you.
Good morning, once again. My name is Taiyana Murray. I am 18 years old and from Oakland, California. I use the pronoun she, her, hers, and I'm a youth leader and intern at the GSA Network, which stands for Gay Straight Alliance. And sorry, I'm a little nervous. I am here to talk about my experiences as someone who is often perceived and treated as a boy or a young man of color. So the GSA Network is working in California with the Boys and Men of Color Alliance in LA to create a safe space for queer youth and youth of color voices to be heard, and to push our definitions and understandings of masculinity and manhood past those that hold us back and towards the ones that will liberate us. For our boys and men of color work, GSA Network focuses on the issues involving anyone who is, has, or will walk the world being viewed as a boy or man of color. We use this umbrella as to include the stories of our trans brothers and sisters of colors from the past, present, and future. Ever since I was in elementary school, I remember wanting to dress like the boys in my class, but because of all the teasing that I knew would become of it, I chose not to. When I went to a GSA Network lobby day in May of 2013, I had a weave and my clothes were all from the women's department. During that trip was the first time I had ever admitted to anyone about my feelings, and everyone there was so supportive. People let me borrow their clothes and help me cover my hair so I could feel as comfortable as possible. The joy I felt on that trip is indescribable. It felt so good that on the train ride back, I decided that I wasn't going back to being unhappy anymore, and from that day on, I've looked like this. I don't know where I would be without the family I've made and everyone from the GSA Network. However, the challenges in my life didn't start after I started looking and dressing like this. It just brought about a set of new challenges. So before I cut my hair, I used to look like So, big difference. And yeah. So, when I was a freshman at Oakland High School, I stopped going to school after winter break. I was going through a lot mentally in regards to my home life and my sexuality. My family had just been evicted from the house we were living in, so my little brother and I were staying with my mom in a shelter. I was also struggling with my sexuality at the time, and coming from a family in the Nation of Islam, fear and self-denial was giving me very bad anxiety. It became so unbearable that I couldn't take going back to school anymore. With everything going on, I couldn't handle the stress of maintaining good grades and being around people every day. On multiple occasions, I ended up in psychiatric hospitals as a result of attempting to harm myself. And once I finally managed to go back to school that March, the teachers and staff at Oakland High School made no attempt to get me caught up on the work I had missed. They told me I had missed too many classes to get caught up. School became a place where I could not be healthy mentally. I didn't believe that I had the potential to grow up and be anything, and it was obvious that my teachers and my school felt the same way. They didn't care enough to even know who I was, so I felt there was no point in going back to school if teachers weren't going to help me. I didn't go back to Oakland High School that year. The following fall, when I enrolled in a new school district, I saw that Oakland Unified School District had passed me to the 10th grade. By passing me, even though they knew I had not completed the classes I needed to for 9th grade, they labeled me as someone who was not worth the time to properly educate. I knew I wasn't prepared to move on to the next grade because I didn't learn the things I needed to in order to follow along in my classes. I don't go to school just to get my diploma. I would like to attend Spelman College in Atlanta after I graduate. I see college as my ticket out of a horrible situation. It's the only way that I can make sure that my adult life and my future family's life will be different from mine so far. I knew that getting into Spelman wouldn't be possible with my grades from the previous year, so I decided to repeat the 9th grade. If I had not made that decision for myself and had instead continued on the path my school pushed me down, I probably would have dropped out or tried to test out of high school early by now. You see, my challenges I faced as a black student in Oakland were combined with some of the unique challenges facing LGBTQ youth of color, which makes pushing us out of schools even more easy. Most of our schools lack the social and mental health supports to help a youth cope with a lifetime of degradation and self-hate, nor are they equipped to help us find our self-value. We lose too many of our trans and queer youth of color to suicide. My school treated me like I was disposable, and I nearly missed out on an education and a life because of it. LGBTQ youth will not have the opportunity to succeed until schools stop punishing and start supporting. However, there are organizations like the GSA Network and the Boys and Men of Color Alliance that can and do that. A lot has changed in the past couple of years. For one, I'm in school. I look the way I want to look and feel most comfortable. I look the way I want to look and feel most comfortable, and yet it is often that many people go out of their way to try to make me feel bad about doing what makes me happy. School-wise, everything was going great until my school got a new principal. He was a white man from deep Texas, so I sensed tension immediately. After being tardy due to transportation issues, my principal told my brother and I that if we were late to school again, we would be expelled. And due to the fact that we go to school 30 miles away on public transportation, another tardy was inevitable. Luckily, teachers who knew us fought to keep us at the school, and now I'm on track to graduate. The majority of queer and trans people under 30 in this country are people of color. We face the same challenges of getting a quality education in this country as other youth of color, in addition to those caused by being a part of the LGBTQ community. New data to be released from GSA Network indicates that gender nonconforming or masculine identified girls are facing harsher punishments than those of their feminine peers. We are being pushed out, transferred, and criminalized and policed at alarming rates. Queer youth make up 15% of the juvenile justice population, yet only 8% of the regular youth population, the majority being youth of color. It took me cutting my hair to really see how differently boys and men of color are truly treated. People are afraid of men of color. And what happens when people are afraid? Just look at things like the Trayvon Martin trial and you will see. Like I said, I take public transportation to school, and one thing that I've noticed is, like, you saw the picture, so there's a big difference. My experience on BART or in public transportation in general has changed tremendously. My biggest fear used to be worrying about getting hit on when I get on the BART, but now it's not even a fear. It's just that I'm uncomfortable because I've noticed how people clutch onto their items more tightly, and how people will avoid sitting in my area of the BART because they're afraid, like they think that I'm going to hurt them or whatever, and I didn't see that before. And then another thing that I've noticed with, since I've cut my hair, is that before, my biggest insecurity with being black was that I thought that black girls were ugly, and I thought that everyone thought I was ugly because I was a black girl. And now my biggest insecurity is that people think that I'm uneducated because I'm black. I go to school in the suburbs, and I'm one of the only black kids, and you have black kids that aren't proud of being black and treat me like I'm less than because I dance and I get loud and I fit sometimes into the stereotype of what it means to be a black person. And yeah, like that's something that eats me alive every day, is just knowing that if I act out or if I am loud or if I have too much fun, it reflects directly on my race. And as we move forward on these initiatives, let us use fresh ideas and new framework that set up youth for the 21st century, one in which all young people of color, men, women, queers, and trans folks all rise. I thank you for your time, and will close with a quote from one of the great women of color from my community, Audre Lorde. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat them at their own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. Racism and homophobia are real conditions of all of our lives in this place and time. I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself, or mainly himself in this case, I guess, and touch that terror and loathing of any difference that lives here. See whose face it wears, then the personal as the political can begin to illuminate all of our choices.
Wow. There are many words in the media that we use for young people, and one that we don't often use is courage. And I think we've seen that exhibit today, courage. When you think about the courage to be yourself when it's easier to not be yourself, the courage to be an undocumented student and feel like there's danger lurking around every corner, to come back to your community with a record that you know is going to follow you, and you know people are going to judge you based on that, but you still decide to strive. And coming from a war-torn country, the courage it takes to just be as whole as you can and still pull yourself together. I think we should applaud them one more time for their courage. All right, so the broader themes of this gathering of great leaders, young and kinda young, it's about continuing to work towards bolstering the lives of boys and young men of color. But I wonder from this very diverse panel, how do you think young advocates can help spur that shift? And is there sufficient room for people who are not men or boys of color to contribute meaningfully to this movement? And you can start wherever you want.
I understand it's about boys of color, but in my experience, I don't think it's only had to be men of color. I think it's supposed to be men and women color because we both went through struggles. And through my experience as a woman of color, I went through, struggles that have been so hard for me to actually be here right now. So, what I'm saying is, it don't have to be men of color, both women and color, because we both have an experience. We both go through stuff, and mostly women go through stuff. So I would say both, men of color.
Jhovani?
I agree with Mariama, right? That it should be more, it's not just boys and men of colors. We all are affected by these issues, and we all fight for this. We're all fighting for this. We're all impacted, and it's just not one single aspect of people. It's all of us. We all are fighting for this.
Now, I want to direct this question to Taiyana, because you spoke about how once you fully dropped your mask and you're being who you are, and you notice that the world perceives you differently, does that change in any way the way you approach the struggles that you're fighting for in your community, now that you're kind of getting a different vantage point?
Definitely. I didn't, I knew that racism was still prevalent today, but I didn't understand to what extent. And also, I didn't understand to what extent how, I'm not gonna say the black community because that's generalizing, but how many people are still homophobic, and how that kind of keeps me from, it's I feel like I have to choose one, because if I feel like working with black people, they're more hesitant towards me because they're like, oh, okay, you're one of those. Not all, obviously, like I said, not generalizing, but yeah, that's definitely become a barrier in trying to. Okay, I'm just gonna stop talking.
No, we got you. And the idea, I want you all to piggyback on that idea that there is sometimes a two-ness or a three-ness within ourselves: race, your class, your culture. Do you at times feel at odds between your struggles of class or color or immigration status? Is there any internal navigation that you have to do? Elizabeth?
So, being Cambodian and falling under the Asian American umbrella, we tend to see that Cambodians and Southeast Asians fall under this model minority myth that we've all heard of, where all Asian Americans are doing well and we don't really need to be in the conversation, but we do. A lot of Cambodian Americans face similar struggles growing up in similar communities. So that's been tough to kind of bring our experience into comprehensive immigration reform, things like that, into that dominant conversation. So that's why we're here today, to kind of just shed light on that and share more.
I think that's one aspect that we don't often hear enough about, the idea of this model minority. When you're speaking with young people, how do you try to break through, especially those who might find themselves, maybe they're not good students, maybe they're not reaching that bar? How do you, chip into that to help them overcome it and not be burdened by it?
For me and my experience in youth development work, I've always found that the story of self and diving into the students' personal struggles is what allows me to further work with the youth, either academically as an upper bound educational advisor or now as a foster youth coordinator. So getting to know someone on the personal level is very much also political.
In your own experiences, what have been some of the greatest challenges in your work, and how do your personal experiences inform that work? And I want to kind of direct that to you, Clarence, because as we know in communities of color across the country, we're dealing with sky-high recidivism rates. We understand that once you come home with a record, it's difficult to get a job, which makes it more difficult to feed your family, which makes it more difficult to progress, especially when you talk about that Ban the Box initiative, where it deters a bunch of people before they even get into that meeting room. So how have your personal experiences informed what you're trying to do for yourself, but also for your community?
I wanna address that first. Like when I first went to juvenile hall, like I had no idea that a record could follow you for something throughout the rest of your life. Or like when you're in school, that's something that they don't tell you. If you commit a crime or something of that nature, that if you get a felony, it's gonna follow you throughout the rest of your life. Like if you go apply for a housing or a job or credit, anything, like this stuff follows you. And you know, I just think as a society, we just need to invest in people. If we invest in the people more, then we'll have a better outcome. And it's just, well, you guys clap up, thank you. But it's the things, it's like we can combat recidivism in a productive way. We have to invest in alternatives to incarceration. Like California spends about $50,000 per year on incarcerating an adult. And just to rehabilitate someone is somewhere around only $5,000. So if we just go ahead and change that and invest in the people more, I think that we'll just be better as a community. And we need to educate people. We need to educate our younger brothers that, you know, you don't have to, I mean, you could be an athlete, that's all right, but, you know, you need to have a fallback plan. You need to go to school, get good grades, and that way, so you could grow up and you know, you could be anything. Like, you don't have to limit yourself. Sky's the limit.
Let me ask you a secondary question. Is that investment limited to financial investment? Because we know how much they're spending to keep us in prisons. Are there other forms of investment that we're not investing in? Is it a matter of mentorship? Is it a matter of internships? What else is there besides money? Because as we know, that sometimes gets mucked up in the political system where the flow isn't as easy as we would like.
Can you repeat that again for me? Because I'm
That was
trying
a
to
big one.
grasp.
What other kinds of investments do you think could help change what's happening in the community besides the money aspect of it?
The money?
We're talking about investing in people.
For me, growing up, I think it was sort of like my mother. She had to be like my mother and father. So I feel like I kind of didn't have that positive role model growing up. And it doesn't have to be somebody that's famous, a celebrity, anything like that to be a role model and show a person like how to go about the right way of doing things. But I just think that if we invest in our young people more as a family, then we will have greater outcomes. But I honestly think that financially that's probably one of the biggest social economic forces that is against us in the society today that we live in. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you got it.
Pretty
You
much.
got it. That was good. And speaking of the idea of familial investment and family, it's always interesting to know how people's families respond to their activism and their work. Because as we know, sometimes there are generational differences. During the civil rights movement, sometimes the younger people had to take those steps forward because older people were more cautious. How have your families responded to the work that you're doing in the community and just stepping up in the ways that you are?
Yeah, I definitely want to answer that question. See, for me, because I work for, they ask me, oh, who do you intern for? GSA? Oh, what does that stand for? Gay Straight Alliance? Oh, like it kind of, because I'm doing, all they hear is gay, so they're like, okay, you're trying to do gay stuff. I don't want to hear about any of that because, like I said, my family's in the Nation of Islam, so they don't really play that stuff. And they don't, acknowledge that I'm doing stuff for race and more than just sexuality. So, yeah, my family doesn't really support my activist work.
And Jhovani, being when you talk about the struggle of being undocumented, where there is, desire to kind of stay low. A lot of people feel like they need to hide themselves for very real possibility of being deported or other adverse impacts. How has it been for you stepping up in a very vocal way, given that it's such a very, very tenuous situation with your documentation?
Well, I think it's important that some of us have to step up, because if nobody does, then there's never going to be a step toward making that change. So somebody has to step up, and I decided that if I don't do it, then who else will? Who else will advocate for us? How else are we going to get there if our voices aren't heard?
Mariama, I want to direct this question to you in terms of your work in your community. Have there been any challenges in terms of the community wanting you to, calm yourself down and be quiet?
Yeah.
How so?
Upon all the things I've been through, basically when when I was bullied, when I was made fun of, all I did was write. Because I write because that was like the positive way that I could think of. I didn't want to think of another negative way that could come to my mind. So what I thought of was to write. So all I did was to write my story. I kept on writing. So I feel like most of our youth right now, all we gotta do is, because we all have a gift. Everybody in this room have a gift. You just have to prove it. You just have to show it. So what I believe is that everybody here have a gift. So what I did was write. So I believe that our youth, what it can do is to do something in a kind of positive way, not in to do something bad, but show in a kind of positive way what you can do, to let your stress out. Probably what you could do is run. That's one. What you could do is write like me, because all I did was write, to take out my stress out. And yeah, that was it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was good. And how has the writing helped you to grow? Who were you before you actually jumped headlong into your writing, and who are you now?
Before, I didn't know how to speak English that much. So all I knew was English, and all I knew was Creole and French. But sometimes I would actually kind of write in my language, and then go through it, and then study it, and then learn some vocabulary words from the English book. And then that's how I started writing my own words in English and stuff. And then my teacher was trying to, publish the book, but I didn't know what his publish is, so I said no. I was scared. But now that I knew, that could have been a great opportunity right now.
With all these challenges that we're talking about, and we know that there are a lot of adults and elders who are fighting for you and want to give you the best opportunity possible. Do you get the sense that they truly understand your challenges, the current challenges? And if so, what are those challenges that might be a little different today than in years past?
Well, okay. Sometimes I do genuinely feel like adults understand, and then we'll get to talking, and I'll think otherwise. It's like I said, for me, I'm a little different. My biggest barrier with the older generation is my sexuality, because there's still people don't understand it, they don't agree with it, all of that. So a lot of the times when adults try to help me, they'll tell me things that like, oh, people just aren't there yet, or you have to be patient. And it's like, what is being patient going to do? Like, that's why I'm trying to work right now, is I'm trying to change that. I'm not going to, I feel like the problem is that people have always said with any movement is, it takes time, but it's like you're counting on that. You're counting on what's going to happen in the future, and we need to focus on right now. Like, yeah, that's how it is, but what are we going to do about that? Yeah, racism is still alive, but what are we going to do about that? People just accept it, and just that's my biggest problem. Is just people, like adults, telling me that I need to be patient. I'm not a patient person. I want to work now.
Right. How frustrating is that?
I get so mad. It's definitely helped me with my anger problems, though. But But I get very angry because it's invalidating how I feel. It's like telling me, oh, you're young, you don't understand how this works. And it's like, I do understand how this works. That's why it's the same way right now that it's been. I'm trying to change. And with the time thing, like, it's just like, yeah, if we wait, we're going to be the adults, and then we're going to do the same thing and go to the youth and say, you have to wait. And then same cycle. Let's do something now.
What is it that they're not hearing? And this is for all of you. What is it that you think the generation before you, what are they not hearing? What are they missing? What is their misconception about your generation?
I think that we don't get enough credit. Like, they focus on, like, oh, all the negative things, like, oh, look at our social media. All those young kids do is get on Instagram and Facebook all day. But it's more than that. Yeah, that's what you see, but that's not all of us. And even I have an Instagram. I use Instagram every day. But that doesn't like, mean that I don't have something that I believe in. I don't feel like we have enough hope.
Can I add something? What she said. I think that was very great because I feel like they don't see what we do positively. They just see the negative side, and although all they see is this generation is killing, stealing, that. But you gotta know that there's people out there. We're all not the same, So why don't you see the impact of other people instead of judging everybody else together? I think we need to make a change.
Jhovani? I'm sorry, man.
I could say when I was a teenager, my mother was a very combative listener.
A combative listener.
Yeah, a combative listener. She would hear me say something, but she'd be like, no, but what you need to do is, I just think that, as adults or parents or whatever, you just need to practice more active listening. Listen to your kids. Because I'm going to share something. My sister is going through, she's having a similar story to hers. And I try to tell my mom, this is how it's going to be. Why don't you just be there for her and just listen? Yeah, stop being in denial and please just hear her out. And if you do that, the relationship, everything will be so much better. And I want to leave it at that.
And off of what you just said about the combative listening, I grew up my whole life hearing, you're too grown, you don't listen. And yeah, I've always been a little ahead of my age, and that's true. But it's like how he said his mom was a combative listener. Most adults that I talk to are combative listeners, and they're combative in the adults that I've come across, not all, like I said, no generalization, just sorry. But I get told often I don't listen, but what they don't realize is that I take everything in. Every day, every conversation that I have with an adult, I take that and I learn about what I'm going to do. I'm 18 and I'm learning what I'm going to do as an adult and what it means to be an adult. I listen, and I feel like adults don't acknowledge that children are listening because we hear everything. Since we were little, we've been sponges and we hear everything. And we soak that up in our own ways and know that they see everything. My family, my whole life, don't go out here and embarrass me in front of these white people. What does that make me think? It's us versus them. We have to act different in front of white people. White people are different. White people, white people, white people. And it's when a little kid's hearing that, and then I see it in my nephew, and I hear my sister saying things like that around him and around all these other kids, and it's we hear everything. And so all these things that adults are putting on us and judging us and these preconceptions that they're making, we have to learn it from somewhere.
You are so well spoken. We could do this all day. I'm going to try to wrap it up. But
I was going to say, for my case, I think that some of the adults do understand because some of us do share the same undercommunication. So a lot of adults do understand what we're facing because they're facing the same things. I think some of the people who don't hear our voices are the ones that choose to ignore us because they don't have the same challenges, so they can't relate. But I think they have to take a minute and say what we have to hear and the problems that we are faced. So
I'm going to get a couple more questions in, and let's just try to keep it really tight so we're running short on time. Yesterday, one of the speakers said that we spend so much time and energy in lip service pointing at those who are oppressing us, but we're not paying much attention to, whose neck our feet are on. We talk about the misconceptions and perceptions of young people, but there really are young people shooting and killing and dying. There are people that are struggling. There literally are people out there struggling at your age and doing things that are negative and self-destructive. How do you, in your communities, deal with your peers about some of the issues that they're facing? And how difficult is it to kind of penetrate the facade, the mask, whatever it is going on?
I don't talk. I just show it with action. And I tell the younger people, like, I was once in your same shoes, but look where I'm at now. And I think that that's very big to show that, instead of just talking about it, be about it. Because I believe that change can happen anytime. And but to answer your question, I let the young people know that, listen, young brother, you could be great if you want to. You don't have to listen to what everyone labels you or these stigmas that are against you. Just look at me. Like, I really show them, like, man, I done went from prison to UC Berkeley. Like, how many people you could say that's done that? That's a powerful in itself. So I lead by example, and hopefully everybody else will follow up, because I'm trying to set a new trend to be a leader for the younger brothers out there that think the only way to be successful is by being a rapper or an athlete. That's how I deal with it.
And I think that's a great note to end on, that you can be great if you want to. You can go from prison to Berkeley. Let's give them one last round of applause for being so well-spoken and eloquent.